Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second panel discussion of the day. This one's called Perspectives on the Human Canine Bond. My name is Dave Dieffenbach, and I'm going to be moderating this discussion. I work here at Embark on our veterinary product, which is called Embark for Veterinarians. Super excited to be able to bring genetics directly to veterinarians as a tool that they can use in their clinical practice. But more relevant to today's topic, a couple of years ago, I received a grad certificate from the University of Tennessee in veterinary human support. In that certificate, we're recognizing the growing needs in the veterinary community for support. We learned a lot about the challenges and opportunities that relationships with animals present to really all people. So I'm really pleased to be able to share this virtual stage with some thought leaders in this shared space that so many people we're learning in this conference have with dogs. In this topic, this human-animal bond topic, the shared space that we have between humans and animals. We have a fantastic group of panelists joining me for today's discussion, exploring this unique relationship. And before I bring them on, I would like to remind you all that you have the opportunity to ask questions. I'll be asking a few questions to get us started, but I really would encourage you to engage in the live chat so I can bring your questions to our skilled panelists as well. So joining me today are Dr. Marty Becker, Dr. Victoria Cussen, Dr. Mariana Serao, and Dr. Brenda Kennedy. All four panelists are experts in their field. And as they come out, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. You might hear me informally calling them by their first name. I've asked for their permission to do so, but they're all highly regarded, well-earned in their titles. Let me go ahead and start with you, Dr. Cussen. If you would start when starting, tell me your name, tell us all your bio, and then maybe one nugget of wisdom that you find yourself surprised that people hear from you about human-animal bond that they weren't familiar with before.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Victoria Kessen. I am the Senior Director for Applied Behavior Research at the ASPCA's Behavioral Sciences team, which is headed by Dr. Pamela Reed. Our team works, we wear a lot of hats actually, but as regards what we'll talk about today, we do support the ASPCA's cruelty case work and disaster relief work as well in the field, providing humane handling support for removing animals from the conditions that they have unfortunately found themselves in, and then also doing behavior assessments to determine their need for behavioral rehabilitation services or safety for placement in the communities. I did my PhD at UC Davis, where I studied individual differences in resiliency to environmental stress and animal cognition, comparative cognition. And before that, I did my master's at the University of Edinburgh in applied animal behavior and animal welfare, where I studied environmental enrichment for pet dogs during periods of social isolation in the home. I've taught animal behavior and animal welfare at UC Davis and at Purdue University. So as you can tell, I dork out about behavior all day, every day. And I'm super excited to be part of this panel and to be able to get a chance to listen to and learn from these other panelists who are doing amazing work. I think the nugget that surprises me the most still is how frequently people don't think about the psychological needs of their pets and their companions. And I know that many people absolutely do, but I think we think a ton about physical care, making sure they're fed and healthy. But we kind of skip over sometimes the frustration or boredom that they can encounter in their everyday lives. And so I always just like to talk about, cognitive enrichment and cognitive needs in animals. And people are like, oh yeah, of course, it makes total sense when they stop to think about it, but frequently they haven't stopped to contemplate it yet. So I'm always excited when I can get folks thinking about that.
Thank you. It's great what people will start thinking about when we remind them of things. They'll see it everywhere. Dr. Becker, would you mind going next, please?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Dr. Marty Becker. I just went to my 50th reunion and I heard Farty Pecker. Hadn't heard that one in about 50 years. I got in a fist fight with the same guy that said it in the 8th grade, but thank God there's different names now. I was born and raised in southern Idaho, down in potato country. Wanted to be a dairy practitioner from age 6. got in the veterinary school at age 20, and Dean Dale Bustad gave a talk on the human-animal bond that was unbelievable and changed my life. I became a companion animal practitioner, so dairy career lasted 30 minutes. He was really privy and partner to that affection connection called the bond, and also the healing power of pets, which through the Delta Society, he was one of the people that started that. That bond led to Chicken Soup for the Soul books. That led to starting on Good Morning America, where I stayed 17 years. That led to other TV like Dr. Oz, where they started calling me America's Veterinarian. I won't tell you what my wife of 45 years calls me. We'll leave that off air. But written 23 books, have a nationally syndicated column. I'm the founder of Fear Free, and it's funny how things happen. I was in a meeting in 2009 at a conference. I fully expected to leave early and sneak out. I said hi to the speaker who had supported me the day before in a keynote, and I was going to sneak out and have a beer and meet my wife for early supper. And she gave a talk on fear, anxiety, and stress, and it changed my life. So that's her, Dr. Karen Overall. I should call her name out. Really, the impetus for starting this thing with Fear Free. The nugget, I just got back from the border of Ukraine and Romania and Moldova. And just a reminder, first of all, people cannot figure out why the cats were so quiet when they're coming there. They don't realize they're in collapsing immobility, that they're frozen in fear. They think they're going to die. They're not. They couldn't figure out they were calm because they weren't doing anything. No, they think they're going to die. And there was a lot of dog bites happening there. And you can imagine the stress of these dogs coming in with whether they had noise phobias or just with other pets and people they don't see. But I see people constantly greeting pets the wrong way. They love them, they see them, they walk up to them, they hoover over them, they put their hand out, can I pet it? What breed is it? What's its name? And they get bitten, and where they should turn sideways. Take a knee if possible, avoid prolonged direct eye contact, and call them over to them. And it's something that we all see. Those of us that know what to do see it 99% of the time on a Starbucks patio or on the street or at a dog park, that people greet dogs the wrong way.
That's awesome. Thank you for that nugget and for the intro. Dr. Kennedy, would you mind going next?
Sure, I'm really excited to be here. I'm Brenda Kennedy. I'm the VP of Canine Health and Research at Canine Companions, which is a service dog organization. We provide, we raise, train, and place dogs with veterans, adults, and children with disabilities. We've done that for over 45 years. I'm in charge of an amazing team. We provide oversight for the veterinary care for those dogs. We have a breeding program that produces about 8 puppies a year, around 4 clients, and provide ongoing services through their life. So I'm really kind of end-to-end in terms of overseeing healthcare for our dogs from birth to end of life. I started out, it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I started out, actually developmental biologist. I got my degree, my master's degree at MIT, decided to go into biotech for a while, back in the 90s, we were just seeking human genes. Moved on to vet school and actually practiced as a private practice 15 years before joining Companion. So from my end, I think one of the messages I always give out to people about pets and their bond is that we all love our pets and the bond is very special. But another thing we do at Canine Companions is we really advocate for our disability dogs. And so it's a reminder to people that not all dogs have public access. We'd love to take them everywhere with us. But if we do that, it can really impair the ability of our teams to be out there. I've had dogs that have been attacked by dogs that are service dogs that have had to retire. So I think understanding the difference between service dogs, therapy dogs, emotional support dogs is all really important, and something that all of us who work with dogs should be able to do that. I'm super excited to be here. This is probably a conference, if I could put together all the topics that I want to learn more about, they're pretty much represented here. So super excited to be here and a part of this great panel.
That's great, thanks. And if anyone just heard Dr. Kennedy bring up some of those definitions and has a question about it, ask the question so that I can ask the question later. Dr. Serao, would you mind finishing off our introductions?
Sure. I am Dr. Serao, Dr. Mariana Serao. I am the Director of Canine Science and Technology of Retrieving Freedom, which is another service dog organization. We focus on pretty much the Midwest, but we cover the whole nation. Our mission is to train service dogs for veterans with disability. Most of our veterans are coming to us for PTSD support and for children with autism, and we train families to help for children with autism as well. I have received my master's and my PhD from Brazil. I did my bachelor's, master's, and PhD in animal science, and can try to tell you how I got here. My work has mainly focused on animal nutrition in the past. So I did a lot of work with canine nutrition for my postdoc, with prebiotics and nutrition and microbiome. And once I started working at the university, I had a very heavy teaching appointment for the companion animal classes, so companion animal nutrition, companion animal management, and other classes. And I also would advise a lot of students. So I worked for the last 5 years at Iowa State University. So we have a very large number of students. At that time, I was advising about 55 students per semester, all companion animal students. And while I was there, I realized that there were a lot of students that really wanted that to work with behavior on service dogs. And I created a project in partnership with Retrieving Freedom where we would bring dogs to campus and students would have those dogs 24/7. And we would work on training them on campus on a very specific environment of buses and cafeteria and all other things. And after a few years working with this group, I decided to join Retrieving Freedom. They asked me to come in, and I oversee their breeding program and canine acquisition, and I also do data analysis for the company to measure impact. One of the things that would be my nugget for this job is that when we have our dogs in public, everybody thinks that our dogs are like that all the time, right? Our dogs are very highly trained, just like Dr. Kennedy was talking about. But they're still dogs, so we need to make sure that they have time to decompress. And there are a lot of enrichment that we would do to make sure that they are being dogs, they are able to relax. And so they're not like that all the time, but when they are in public, they are working. And I'm going to reiterate what Dr. Kennedy said. So it's a very specific job. Not all of our dogs that go into our program are going to be placed as service dogs because not every dog has what it takes to be a service dog. But once you are in the public, the dog is working. Interactions with other dogs can really be harmful at certain times if the other dogs are not behaving as well. So that would be my nugget. Now, our dogs are not like that all the time, and they were not born like that. There's a lot of work that we do to make them as good as they are.
That's awesome. Thank you. And they do such good work for us, both, actually all of us. So let's go ahead and get started. This has been a great introduction, and I'm going to start with a general question. Those who were involved in day one, you heard Dr. Larson talk yesterday, and Dr. Larson introduced to me some learnings that there's some controversy around, well, when did humans and canines first start interacting? But I think we all know that interaction is more real than ever, right? The way we interact and the importance. What I want to really start with is, here we are in 2022. What's the baseline? What's the work you're doing right now on the human-animal bond in your organization? What do you want to share as far as the work that you're doing for the mutual benefit of dogs and people? And I'll start with you again, Dr. Kessen.
Okay, found the mute button. We're doing okay. So the work that we're doing as part of my role, we're really looking to, develop and implement our sort of strategic research strategy, and that involves both our internal work and then also what I think of as capacity building, sort of data-driven decision-making about behavior interventions in the shelter, for example, working with partner shelters and also through our seed grant program. I'm coming at the human-animal bond from maybe the back end in a lot of ways, in terms of frequently, in terms of our cruelty work, we're working with animals where the bond has, been broken, perhaps sometimes through mental health issues in the case of hoarding cases, or, the bond has unfortunately been abused for, greed purposes in the case of dog fighting. And then our goal obviously is to take these animals and get them to a place where they can, as someone titled a paper in the literature years ago, reforge the bond, right, and have successful new homes and new life experiences. And so a lot of what I think about has to do with behavioral phenotyping. And as I'm sure lots of folks at Embark think about, and certainly lots of folks that work with assistants and therapy and service animals think about this as well. Like, we know that there are tons of challenges around behavioral phenotyping and developing objective measures that we can use to better understand both the needs of the animals today, which is often what we think about at the A in terms of developing targeted behavior interventions in shelter to reduce, euthanasia of adoptable pets. But then also to understand potentially their behavior in the future, which is obviously super challenging. And I don't think anyone has that dialed quite yet. And also, I think it's super important. The behavioral phenotyping is really important from a sort of human-animal bond perspective, again, going from the direction of humans to animals to ensure psychological quality of life of the animals during their stays in our shelters, for sure. So really understanding what they need, and so that we can provide for that and prevent behavioral deterioration before they go on to their homes, or provide, more intensive behavioral rehabilitation services if necessary. So I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully it did.
Yeah, it did. And part of this is just to inspire questions from the audience. I do have one question I'm going to put out here that came in. I'll throw it in through, as I told you I would. And if we can't answer it, I promise I'll get an Embarker to answer the question offline. But, a study came out suggesting the human-canine bond is modulated by variants in the Williams locus. A locus that, when deleted in humans, causes the hypersocial syndrome. I don't know if it's familiar to any of you, but the question is, how can we compare and contrast what we know about behavioral development in humans to dogs? And Victoria, do you want to start with that since you were just on that?
Oh, I don't think I want to start with that. I think that might be a good question for one of the veterinarians on the panelists. I don't know that I would be super comfortable in addressing that question.
That's great. Anybody on the top, anybody feel comfortable approaching this? Otherwise, the basic question, if we just ignore the Williams locus, is how can we compare and contrast what we know about human behavioral development to or from dogs, and just ignoring the locus question. Is there any interest in exploring that?
I don't know that I can answer the question, but I will say that we certainly look at the sort of human development literature frequently in terms of understanding the effects of early life adversity on later behavior of animals. And also, we've been also looking at things like methylation and how that the experiences of the mother in substandard housing conditions might impact the development and ultimate behavior of her offspring. But that obviously is more of a sort of inspiration for us as opposed to giving a concrete answer about how humans and dogs compare in their development.
That's great. Dr. Kennedy, were you offering some insights?
Yeah, we have, one thing I did in my intro is that I also have a really amazing small dog research team, and we work with quite a number of really great collaborators in the dog space, so including Duke Canine Cognition Center and University of Arizona Canine Cognition Center. So we've looked at specifically the development of social in dogs, adult dogs, as well as most recently puppies, and definitely similarities in some of those early developmental features in dogs and like babies. So, for example, with something like a pointing gesture for a dog, being able to follow, if you point at something to them, they're able to follow those gestures even as a puppy, and then they get better at that as when they're adult dogs. But that's similar to what we see like in young children at 18 months of age. They start to be able to follow those types of social cues, whereas our closest, primate relatives can't. So we're definitely interested also in social cognition from the standpoint of how our dogs communicate with people and how important in the service dog, world it is, particularly for our dogs that are very much directed to do tasks. Making eye contact, watching a person's, cues, working with a trainer are all really important for dogs to succeed in the roles that we need them to do. So that's one of the ways where we've been looking at research-wise, kind of some of the things that.
David, could I chime in on a non-scientific part? My late mother, Virginia, she was totally unimpressed with everything I ever did, except when I was in Reader's Digest. She was on the toilet with one of the early mobile, cordless phones. I could hear her flushing the toilet. I'm like, oh my God. She was so excited I was in Reader's Digest. And then I spoke at the Smithsonian Institution where I debated somebody about, do dogs have emotions? And of course, I took the part that they do have emotions. And I think any of us that are on this panel that work with dogs all the time, and you go home and they smell these other dogs on there, are like, you filthy cheater, like what have you, their hands, their paws on their hips, calling us out. But, I've been involved with this human-animal bond, celebrating, protecting, and nurturing the bond ever since that got ignited in me by Leo Bustad. And I started to understand, the health benefits and everything. But before Fear Free started, I thought that the stress we were seeing in the veterinary practice or in grooming and things like that was collateral damage. There was nothing you can do, and didn't realize the damage it caused. And so for my colleagues on this panel, there's 100 boarded veterinary behaviorists by the American College of Veterinary Behaviorists. 65 are part of Fear Free. We also have a bunch of applied animal behaviorists and PhD behaviorists and ethologists. They've known this stuff for decades. I'm no Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin's on Fear Free. She's gifted. Before this started, I was stretching cats out into 2 zip codes because that's what I was taught. I was part of a pile of text restraint to hold a dog down to get a blood sample or trim their nails. Yeah, we could get it done. But Karen, overall, talking about fear is the worst thing a social species can experience, how it causes permanent damage to the brain, that fear is caused by something painful or disturbing. Like for the audience, you trim the nails too short, that's painful. Now the pet sees the nail trimmers, that's disturbing. You use the syringe to draw a blood sample, give a vaccination, give antibiotics, that's painful. Now they see the syringe is disturbing. So now, like somebody said, you just see it everywhere. A Starbucks patio to a war zone to walking down the street. It's so visible once you know the signs of fear, anxiety, and stress in companion animals. And somebody mentioned this earlier, we have an obligation that they're not just physically healthy, but they're emotionally healthy. And that spreads to anybody that provides services, I think, to pets.
Thanks for that perspective, Dr. Becker. It's great hearing the fear-free perspective, and I agree. Once you know the signs, they're everywhere, and it's so important people learn them. I do have a question, but I'm gonna go to Dr. Serao right now. I want to give you a chance to speak about some of the current work you're doing in 2022 that's interesting and exciting.
So as part of my work, we have to do a lot of data collection on our clients and our training and whatnot. And we are not even close to what canine companions are doing as far as size and number of dogs and number of clients. We are in a very small area in the Midwest. But what we have been working a lot is how do we help our clients to go with their service dogs into their classroom. So remember, we work with children with autism, and the way that we work in our training is that a child is not considered an independent handler, so you always have to pair with an adult to help them out in public so that we don't put the dog or the child in any situation that's going to be problematic in the future. So it's very interesting to see how for a family that we have in one state or in one county as well, it's very receptive. We go into the school to help set up that place for a successful team to come in. And the school is very, very welcoming, and some other ones. This the school is like, nope, I don't want to do anything with that. And for me, the reason is that we don't understand what our dogs are doing for our clients, and not everybody is, I don't understand why, but not everybody is into dogs, right? Those are not my kind of people. But how do we approach that to create that bond in the school as well? Because as Marty said, was talking about how people don't know how to, we were talking before, how to approach a dog and how we can create issues with dog bites and all those things. In the school is the same thing. Once you don't have an adult supervision, you're going to have kids feeding dogs under the table. So how do we help our clients? And us as an organization, we decided that one of the things that we want to do is to come into those schools as part of an education component. So you remember, like, I work at the university for more than 10 years now, so teaching is my thing. And how do we create that empathy level with the whole school district to support our clients? And in anecdotally speaking, I think it's about bringing that information that the same way that we interact as human beings, it's how our clients are going to interact with their dogs. So if we can create that basic level of respect and understanding what the dog is doing as far as work, it's very helpful for our clients. Because when you see a guide dog, for example, that has the leather harness, and you clearly see that the handler needs that dog to cross the street, everybody will stop and help out. But for our clients, they're clients with most of the time with what we call invisible disabilities. So they have a dog, you don't know what the dog is for, and it's not your job to know what the dog is for, just to respect that dog is coming in to assist an individual that just wants to live in a community just like we all do. So we really want to help people understand those individual invisible disabilities. And so that's really my excitement part of 2022 is us going into schools and helping out and just advocating for our clients.
That's you just taught me something. That's a great term, invisible disabilities, and I think that applies well beyond schools. Right? Thank you for that.
Yeah.
A couple questions in the chat. One to Brenda. After we talked a bit about the human behavior perspective, how have you integrated the social cognition research into your training programs? Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. Everything that we want to do research-wise, is not only is it just helping us learn about dogs, but obviously it's with a purpose. It's to help improve our program. So one of the ways that we can look at, for example, years ago, we started working with Duke about 11 years ago, looking at our dogs that were entering professional training after they've been raised in a volunteer home for 18 months. And we put them through a series of a variety of behavioral type tests, including some of these social cognition or other cognition, memory, impulse control, a whole series of tests. And the goal is to see, one, how our dogs perform on that, but most importantly, which of those skills are eventually going to be most important for them to have when they're in their working role. So, and then the third layer to that, of course, is, are some of these things heritable, such that we can actually target them in our breeding program. So that's kind of the process that we've been going through. A lot of it is a lot of data gathering, because when you're looking at traits like this, right, there's a high variability in our dogs between these and other behavioral assessments as well. So we're trying to identify things that are important for our dogs eventually to succeed and foster them through all of our processes, whether it be with our volunteer puppy raisers, for example, we really take a very strong, handler-focused approach with our dogs. So in the beginning, we're encouraging those dogs to make eye contact with us. We're encouraging them to really, look to us for direction. That makes our type of service dogs a little bit different than some other service dogs, like guide dogs, that need to be more independent. Again, ours are very task-oriented. They're told to do things. Our hearing dogs are a little bit different because and dogs for veterans with PTSD, because they have to sense the environment more. But a lot of our dogs are going to get a task, so they really need to be looking for direction from a person. So it's particularly important to foster those in our training programs. On some of those social tasks that I mentioned in puppies, we looked at over 300 puppies, to get some data to look at heritability. Since we've been breeding our dogs for over 30 years, we can put that together with their pedigrees to say how heritable is, like, a dog following a pointing cue. How much of the variation can we attribute to genetics? So between that and then another task we do where we actually talk to a dog, we give a sort of a dog-directed speech to them and see how much eye contact a dog makes. Both of those tasks are over 40% of the variation can be attributed to genetics, and that's huge, right? When we think of behavioral or traits, I never would have thought. I was hoping for 15% or 20%, but and we've been breeding our dogs over years. We look at things like success, how easy they are to manage, and that. But now we have tools we can be so much more targeted in that if we know eventually what we can shoot for. Of course, can we identify genes? Can we really create all of that? So we're working towards all of that. So we're kind of hitting it from all these different areas, from what we can do in training and socialization in the environment, and what we can do on sort of the breeding side.
That's great. Thank you for that thorough response. That's great. I'm going to move on to a slightly different question, and well, I'll pick one of you to answer it after I say it. What are the benefits of allowing a dog to do their job or a job for their mental health and for strengthening this human-animal bond? And I think this relates a little bit to what you said, Dr. Cussen, about the psychological need of pets potentially. But the question really gets into if breed-specific jobs, anything, like what's the benefit to the dog's mental wellness about letting them do a job or their job?
Yeah, so there has been work that's been done looking at frustration in dogs, and also a potential link to, between frustration and even potentially aggression. There's something called the frustration aggression hypothesis in the human literature, and there's been a little bit of work done on that in the canine literature as well. So anytime we're talking about goal-directed behavior, which really when we're talking about artificial selection for specific jobs, like with working dogs, right, they have these highly motivated goal-directed behaviors that they've sort of been selected to perform. And when goal-directed behavior is repeatedly thwarted, that's frustrating. And, speaking of Dr. Becker mentioned Washington State University, or Dr. Bustad, but PANSCEP was there, and his work looking at this sort of repeated thwarting of goal-directed behavior and how that can then activate what he referred to as the rage circuit. So it's basically activating these negatively valenced emotions in animals when they are repeatedly thwarted or frustrated in these goal-directed behaviors. The other thing that we are all probably fairly familiar with is something called learned helplessness, when animals, when their behavior fails to have an effect on the environmental circumstances that they find themselves in, they will eventually learn that their behavior is ineffective and give up and stop trying. And sadly, in some ways, when we think about pet owner populations, sometimes what we see, Dr. Becker mentioned this is sort of failure to interpret behavior correctly sometimes. So when an animal is shut down and anhedonic because they've learned that they can't actually make things happen in their environment, they're easier to deal with, right? And so I jokingly say to my sister and relatives that they've given up on life in a way, right? And it makes it easier when they do that than when they're at your feet every 2 seconds with their ball. Like, let's do our thing. Let's do the thing. Let's do the thing. I live with a Belgian Malinois, an Australian cattle dog. So they're always like, let's do the thing when we talk about these. And of course, I think all dogs have these same, the same suite of basic psychological needs. They learn, they have goal-directed behavior, they have motivations, and as Dr. Becker said, emotions. They're feeling, thinking creatures, and so I think the working dogs and the high drive dogs, it's a difference of degree, not of kind, as Darwin would say, right? Like, so it's just their motivation and frustration might be up here versus down here. And so I personally, this is my pet area, but I think it has a massive impact on welfare of animals when we talk about persistent chronic frustration of goal-directed behavior.
That's great. Does anybody else on the panel want to add to that answer from a different perspective?
Yeah, so it's not research related at all, but I always, so if you were here for the keynote speaker yesterday, and he did a really good job on mapping out that closeness of human and canines on over our evolution, and just saying like you can talk about demographics or food, so why can't you think about behavior as well? So we are different species, but we mimic each other quite a bit, right? So if you remember 2 years ago when we were all in lockdown and we were really stressed out about not being able to get out because we couldn't do our jobs and we couldn't go out and do our free will, dogs are going to be the same way. I'm not saying that you have to buy sheep if you have a cattle dog. It's not that, but you have to stimulate those dogs cognition wise, behavior wise, so that they can at least put their brain to work. Because if you stop giving that stimulation for them and you shut down those pathways, it's going to go somewhere else, and that's when we start seeing stereotypical behaviors and aggressions, and then they're going to all end up for Victoria to fix. So so that's what I was like. In my area, and especially here now working with clients and fosters and things like that, there's this first tendency of thinking that anything that's going wrong with the dog is because of nutrition. So we always get blamed for that for some reason. And they're always willing, they just want to change the food. And it's probably allergies. And I'm like, okay, let's go back and see, what are we doing for enrichment for these dogs? What are we doing in the house? And when you ask them, like, what are you feeding your dog? Oh, just the 2 cups of dog food that I give a day. What are you feeding the dogs? And then we can kind of start getting more information. And we can use food as enrichment for sure to help in a lot of these issues. But I want to say that 75% of the times that I'm dealing with either clients or fosters that are having issues at home with their dogs, it's not an allergy. It's just a matter of the dog is getting bored, because it might be staying in the house for too long for that period of week, and then you're going to see them licking paws or licking. And yes, it might be allergies, but first let's talk about their brains, and then we can go into changing their diets. So that's my 2 cents.
I think you raise a super good point too, Mariana, about you don't have to give them sheep, right? Like, we can provide for these psychological needs in animals without having the sort of historic substrate, I suppose, that they would normally have worked with or focused their brains on. And as you said, it can be something completely simple, like scatter feeding, right? Like throwing their kibble in the grass and letting them find it. Like things as simple as that, all the way up to obviously doing dog sports and doing advanced training with them and really getting them thinking. And the one other point I would just make is that when you do the mental well-being of animals, it's something that's super special to watch. And I'm sure that Marty and Brenda see this as well all the time, when they light up, right? When they're given the opportunity to use their brains and like do things and have an impact on what happens in the environment around them. So like, we selfishly as humans get something great out of it too, because it just changes the level of the human animal bond, I think, to a higher.
And just quickly, Marty, I know you want to say, I just want to encourage you.
Yeah, David, real quickly, I think all of us always fantasize it'd be nice to be retired. But dogs, and cats, their bodies are built for movement. Their minds, I live in an area where we see wolves frequently. You never see a waddling wolf or a corpulent coyote with a deer gut by the side of the road going, oh my God, I've let myself go. They wake up hungry and it's let's roll. 80% of their waking hours spent in pursuit of food. And I joke sometimes, when I was a kid, we used to come home and watch Lassie from school. Now, Lassie was saving Timmy from the well. Now Lassie's collapsed in front of the TV watching Animal Planet reruns. And I'm a below average veterinarian, and that's no joke technically, but I listen. And the PhD behaviorist, Brian Harrod-Duke and Alexander Horowitz and Temple Grandin and all these people, we haven't fed out of food bowls at our North Idaho ranch for 20 years. We make it a hunt. We use food puzzles, food dispensing devices. Even our barn cats, our feral barn cats, food is distributed around in these Lego blocks of hay, so they go around and find their food. And So there's some simple things we can do, but I always think about feeding, especially that you got to feed the body and feed the mind. And one thing, by the way, you mentioned about this time of year, the number one thing people take dogs to the veterinarian for is skin problems. The number one thing we diagnose is dental problems. So one of the things you should do, and I know this is off track, but I want to save everybody some money and misery for dogs, because remember, if fear is caused by something painful, this is the time of year when you see a lot of the skin issues because it's flea season. It's also what we call atopy. So the pollens and stuff you see in your, we start getting, buying Claritin and all that stuff now. Your dog is basically a Swiffer or a dust mop. Everything that's on the floor is on them. And if you get grossed out by what's on the Swiffer, that's on your dog. So you need to bathe them once a week so that you prevent the skin problems, so you prevent the pain and the discomfort that causes the emotional problems. So I guess it does kind of tie in.
Thank you, Marty. Brenda, you wanted to add something here a little bit more about this topic.
Yeah, I think another piece of it, and everybody's making great points, which I completely agree with. I think there's another piece of looking at, kind of paralleling the human side and looking at longevity, and that it's really good to maintain mental activity. I completely appreciate Victoria's comment about stress too. And I will tell you that's, with our dogs having to go through changing people's homes, and they come into the kennels for a while and they have to live, with a person and work, there's a lot of stress for that dog. And really we lose a lot of dogs because they can't respond to the stress. And we acknowledge that and recognize that and put that dog in a situation that it's going to do well in. But it's interesting in working with groups like the Dog Aging Project or looking at their work, what is cognitive decline look like, in dogs too? Can we minimize that? Can we, keep them active and healthy, which will help improve their healthy life years, their health span, and then hopefully their longevity as well. So I think all these things tie together to provide a lot of great benefit to dogs. That mental activity can't be understated, and keeping them physically active in combination is just a win-win, I think, all around for our dogs. It's how we'd like to live, right? Our dogs live with us, they're in our environments, they can accompany us in what they do, and it is our job to really help them maintain that healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I love that. And comment I was going to make earlier, Dr. Larson's keynote that Dr. Serao mentioned, if you didn't watch it yesterday, watch it. He makes a compelling argument that he doesn't quite say this, but we've almost merged into one super species now. We're so similar in everything we do together, for sure. Moving on to a slightly different question coming from the crowd. And I'm going to start with you on this one, Marty. What is the behavioral impact or psychological or emotional impact even when people use things like electronic collars to shock for wrong behavior? Can you speak to that?
Oh my gosh. I'm not a board of veterinary behaviorist or a PhD behaviorist, but we know that those things, even of the benefits of positive reward-based training. But I just give you an example. I have a dog that saw a rabbit one time up beside our horse barn. Every single day, that dog runs back to see if that rabbit's back. That was 6 years ago. And so I'm in therapy for the first time ever. I got to meet a lot of different Marty Beckers. There's some real strange ones out there, I'll tell you. But you can ferret out different things that cause you trauma in your past, whether it was my dad was a manic depressive, an alcoholic. With pets, you can't ferret it out. There's no way for a dog to know, was it the fact that they felt shock one time? Was it that they were attacked by this kind of dog in this area? Did they go into this exam room and have a bad experience? So the one thing I want to, we can this is thunderstorm season in Tampa, Florida, the thunderstorm capital of the world. Fireworks are coming up in a couple months. None of these pets should have to suffer from noise phobias and think they're going to die. I often comment, you go to, I won't mention the chain stores, but you go to the chain pet shops and look at grooming. You want to see what fear, anxiety, and stress looks like? That's every one of those pets in grooming has fear, anxiety, and stress at a high level. So there are things we can do like compression garments and pheromones and nutraceuticals that we can use, but often you need to go to a pharmaceutical. With a pharmaceutical like generic Xanax, what's called alprazolam, or some of the FDA products like Celio, we use gabapentin on almost all cats that come in now. We used to say cats coming to the clinic were effed, as in fight, flight, freeze, or fidget. with gabapentin, cue your best Cheech and Chong voice. It's like, far out, man, wow, this is nice. They have such a great visit. Simple, safe, effective. But just one event like that, one shock, can cause a lifetime of misery for these pets.
Any other panelists want to add to that? I'll move on to another topic. Okay, great. So I'm gonna we've got 15 minutes left, but I want to move on to another line of topics, and I'm going to tie this into a question. I had asked you all to think a bit about opportunities and challenges in the future, and perhaps you can tie it into a question someone just offered, which is, if someone in the audience wants to get involved more in the human-animal bond professionally, wondering where the areas of opportunity really are for people to have an impact. So starting with you, Mariana, would you mind just talking about some of the challenges you see, and if you feel compelled, maybe offering some advice on where people might offer to help?
So I did see some question about, like, how can I get involved on human-animal bond and all those things. And there are a lot of ways that you can get post-degree educations on human-animal bond now, which is great. There's a lot of research coming out on the human-animal bond, which is also great. But we can have an impact in any area that we work with. So not just for assistant doctor and training, but we were talking about feeding and anxiety and enrichment and fear. And if you think about the relationship of a pet owner with their dogs or their cats, you come from a whole day of work and you're coming home. I'm just thinking about all of us back in the office and not working from home, but you come home. The only time that you really can recognize, if you don't understand any of the behaviors of signs of stress and happiness of any of the animals, when you're feeding your dog, you know that you're pleasing your dog, right? They come with the wagging tail, the cat will come and purring, which is one of the reasons why we see a lot of obesity nowadays, is because we want to please the animal. So we know that feeding pleases the animal. So let's go ahead and feed and feed and feed. And we don't do that in a malicious way. We all are coming with a good intention, but it's a matter of understanding how that bond can be increased on that specific time. So you're going to be seeing a lot of people feeding different. So like Marty was saying, that he has the dispensers and he's going to make their dogs work or their cats work for their food. But also, how can you include your animals into your dinner time, right? It's not like, I don't want my dogs eating with me on the table. I understand that, but how can I make it more pleasant for them? So how can I increase enrichment for them to be a nice relationship? Because I know that that's when they like me, right? Is I'm feeding them. There are a lot of other ways that you can please your animals, but that's an easy solution, is how can you increase that relationship by feeding them in a different way? Maybe it's taking longer to feed. Maybe it's feeding in different times. Maybe it's freezing their food and making them work a little bit for their feeding, or you preparing their food and let them see you preparing their food. So that's a bonding time for sure. As for our industry, I want to say that relationship is not built night and day. So everybody thinks that as soon as I give our trained dogs on a leash to someone else, that dog is going to perform exactly how it's supposed to do. Our clients will have their dogs for about 3 months in their homes, and then we'll come for a home visit again and work with them, because there needs to be a bonding time of our clients with their dogs as well. We tailor the training for our clients. They pass a long time training with a lot of dogs to see which one is the best for them. But once they get their dogs home, there needs to be some bonding creation. So for families, for example, when we have children with autism and we have that dog, parent, and child, we say, your child will give the treat, you give the command, you hold the leash. If I have to say no to a dog, it comes from mom, not from the child, because we want to make sure that child has potential and time to bond with that dog as well. And that has proven to be a more successful route in our program. I don't know if I answered your question really well, but those were my 2 cents that I wanted to give.
No right or wrong answers here at all. Brenda, would you mind sharing a little bit more about what excites you about with the what's cutting edge or what's coming next, and if you feel compelled, offer some advice for where people can help.
I'm super excited about the opportunities that we can have by, looking at genetics of things that we talked about. I mean, I think there's just a huge opportunity for bringing in large amounts of data and information and working collaboratively. That's really where we leverage our results, is when we can work as a group. I always tell all my volunteers that they are citizen science for me. So whenever they have to answer a questionnaire, they do monthly reports about all kinds of parameters on their dogs. They literally run some of our studies on dams. They might be nutrition studies or other studies, or they're collecting the biological samples for me. So, and there are opportunities for anybody, if they want to get involved in some of these citizen science studies, to participate, larger, like the Dog Aging Project, like there's a Many Dogs project that other universities are participating in and looking at these pointing gestures. So we can generalize from some of the findings that organizations like ours are able to come up with. We want things that are going to be useful, obviously, for all dogs as well as impacting our organization. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in what we can do shared and collectively. On all levels. There's many great organizations, and some of the guide dog organizations are much older than ours, have very, very rich data sets that we could glean and learn a lot from. I also, think that, just finding ways to, again, share with people the importance of the human-animal bond, advocating wherever people can for, the welfare and the benefit of animals is just really critical across the board. I'm also excited about the opportunities in looking at health. Can we tease out more information about some of these complex health traits that can really help us, particularly those of us that breed, but really just any animal? Can we help and make these medical advances in both diagnosis, prevention, and treatment? Those are all the areas where I see there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of great movement now. So I think it's an exciting time to be in dogs, right? Everybody loves them. They do share our environment. They're kind of a sentinel for our own lives. And I think it's really kind of endless as to what we can learn. And I drink the dog Kool-Aid too. I can't imagine anybody not wanting to be part of that. But we also need to be able to, on our side, on the service animal side, is really talk about the impact of these dogs in a really scientific and meaningful way. We need quantitative data that tells people the benefits of dogs, so that legislatively, things will be adopted in advance for animals and pets and dogs and working dogs. But also, we need physicians to understand the benefit of dogs, if it's appropriate to have a pet in a situation as a dog that's just going to be emotional support, or does a person need a service dog? We need to get buy-in, and we do that with data.
Yeah, that's great. There's some great themes coming out around the psychological need of pets to feel in a non-fear environment, but also for people to recognize the value of animals, not always pets, sometimes as service dogs. Marty, can I ask you to jump in and share a little bit about what excites you in some?
First of all, Jim, you do a great job at this, and I don't say this every time I do one of these things, but I feel like you're leading some kind of spiritual retreat or something. You kind of got the look and the way you do this, so thanks for an excellent job. As a veterinarian, I went to veterinary school, like I said, to be a dairy practitioner. Went to companion animal and have been involved with that luckily my whole life. One of the things that's been so sad is to know if you get a golden retriever, 8 years are going to probably get cancer. If you have a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, they're going to have atrial heart problems. And so I really applaud the work like Embark has done, to where I think in the future we'll have dogs that are healthier than you would expect them to be and happier than you would expect them to be. I think this is going to be a great leap forward. I just feel so sorry for these. And one thing, I should give an example of what we do. So now I'm on 5 national boards and 5 local humane societies, and I see them changing now from an orphanage to community centers. And for example, the one in Sandpoint, Idaho, was Panhandle Animal Shelter. Now it's Better Together Animal Alliance, and they have a dog park, a fly ball track, they have a thrift store, they have a food bank, they have subsidized veterinary services. But what do they do with all those old runs is they do free puppy socialization, and then they're the best place in the whole area to provide daycare. But really importantly, once a month, there's a meeting where all the breeders in the area can bring in adult dogs so they can see what a wolfhound looks like or a teacup poodle. The people that are interested in buying a dog can come in and see what they look like. And then, so a veterinarian will get up and say, we've got 15 of the AKSA breeds here. Let me tell you what we see as a veterinarian. And you can talk about the problems a Dalmatian or a Shar-Pei will have, or a Golden Retriever. If you're going to get an English Bulldog, it may change when you realize it has to have surgery even to breathe right at the start. And then we have trainers talk about, okay, do you want a dog that sits in your lap or a dog that runs laps around the football field? Not too many people that are elderly should probably get a Border Collie if they live in an apartment. But I see the work that you're doing, the scientists on this panel, as really given us a chance to have for that bond to be longer and stronger, is I guess. So I so applaud the work you guys do, and I'm thankful. I can't wait to be able to utilize it more in practice.
Thank you. And Vicki, Victoria, I don't want to cut you short, but if you would just in a couple of minutes can share a little bit of what excites you coming next as well.
Yeah, sure. I think reiterating what Brenda said, I think, data excites me because I'm a complete dork. But I think it's a good time to be in dogs, and it's a great time to be in data because of all of the new solutions we have, passive recording devices, things like accelerometers and force meters, where we can really start to quantify what are the dogs doing in real time to get, look at phenotyping impulsivity, for example, which Brenda mentioned earlier, and then up to and through, obviously, what the work that Embark is doing. And I apologize, my dog's barking, of course, on cue in the background, but looking at genomics and genetic markers up through and epigenetic markers. So we're really interested in developing biomarkers and behavioral phenotypes that are associated with animals from different types of cruelty cases, for example, so that we can document psychological trauma in the absence of physical injuries or scars, so that we can do a better job of prosecuting people who do these things to animals, and also further hone our sort of individualized behavioral intervention. So I think there's so much promise in terms of really being able to better document behavior in ways that we never could, with a pen or a pencil or even a video camera, just because we're so limited by, human capital to watch animals at all times. And now we have devices that can fit in our pocket and do it for us. So.
Thank you for that. And there are some questions in the chat we haven't been able to get to. One person was asking for resources. We'll try to get those into the broad chat for folks, so you can go to the URLs that the panelists are suggesting you can go. I want to just end here with a true appreciation for all of your work. It's great. I've learned so much. I've learned a lot about psychological need of pets. My cats are going to hear from me now. I've heard a lot about just the general needs of pet recognized fear. So hopefully everyone learned a lot, and thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. That was a fantastic discussion, and to all of our panelists for your participation, Victoria, Marty, Brenda, and Mariana. Not sure if Dave was able to highlight his own accolades at the beginning of this topic, but he is a leader in Embark's product department and has had an amazing career over the last 25 years in the veterinary industry. So I really want to thank him again for moderating the panel. For all of our viewers, just as a couple of quick reminders, as I've shared throughout the day, you can go to the Embark booth if you want to make a request to Embark about research. We've heard this come up in a number of panels and Q&A sessions today. Embark has created a form that you can fill out to request a particular research initiative, and you can share details via that form, which is, again, if you go to the lobby, click on the Embark booth, and then click on the booth rep chat button. Additionally, I know there was a lot of questions that came in that weren't able to be answered, so you can also post those over there in the booth chat. And lastly, we've had a number of amazing posts on social media over the last 2 days, getting a lot of engagement and responses. So thank you again for that, and remember to use the hashtag Canine Health Summit when you do so. As for now, the next sessions are beginning right away. We have a presentation by Dr. Will Hendricks on cancer genome landscapes and actionability horizons, how DNA is changing the way we treat cancer patients. So we'll look forward to seeing you for that presentation soon.